Hello, this is Cotton Stoops and welcome back to another Lumion Legacy HTUC video, and today's video is on the second Lumion that has been leaked to get a Soul Burst, and that is Eruptidon. Eruptidon is a very strong Lumion just solely based off of how hard it can hit after its Soul Burst, and there is a lot of top tier attributes to talk about, so let's get into that in today's video. This is Cotton Stoops and today's video is all about how to use and counter Soul Burst Eruptidon. So the role that Soul Burst will be playing in Eruptidon's viability is an essential question to ask, and we can answer this question with its base stats. Its base stats are really simple, with every stat it has is really great. It has a great HP stat of 90 along with a pair of 89 defenses, which is admittedly pretty bulky for a offensive Lumion. It is more bulky than the likes of Valkyrie, which is a pretty common offensive Lumion which is known to be running more bulky sets in the previous metagame. So just know that Eruptidon has the ability to survive a few hits before going down. It also does have a decent melee attack stat of 99, but its main stat which it will be using is undeniably its range attack stat of 127. This range attack stat is higher than the likes of Valkyrie and Namore, and will be getting more boosted with its ability Pyro Pro, which makes its fire attacks 50% more damage. It also does have a pretty bad energy or speed stat of 80, which I forgot to put in here, but while it does outspeed pretty much most walls like on invested to, this is still a pretty bad speed tier because this makes Eruptidon pretty prone to being revenge killed. And as for the role, it is pretty obvious that Eruptidon will be a great offensive wall breaker, but it does get revenge killed pretty easily even with those high base stats. Just note that Eruptidon will probably not be dying in 1 or 2 hits unless it's from a quad effective move. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the set for Soul Burst Eruptidon. So the set that Soul Burst Eruptidon is really simple here, and our ability of choice is the only ability we can choose, and that is Pyro Pro. Pyro Pro is basically the Pyro equivalent of Eruptidon's normal or secret ability, except it does 50% damage, which it already does, and fire type moves cost 10% more. This means moves such as Fire Breath now cost 55 energy more, or 55 energy instead of 50 energy. Its personality will be very smart, frail, and tender. This is so we can hit as hard as possible, and we can at the very least 3-hit KO stuff like Venolin, Gargolem Defense, Setamars, Pyrolin on the swap, even without Magnifies. And with Magnifies and very smart, you're guaranteeing to be 2-hit KOing all range attacking or all ranged walling meta walls in this metagame. So Eruptidon looks really scary when it is compared to the previous metagame. Your item of course is Erupt Burst, which will allow you to Soul Burst, which is the main part of this set, and of course your moveset will be Magnify, Fire Breath, Dark Surge, and Landslide. Landslide is very essential here as this will let you hit stuff like Pyrolin and Venolin super effectively so you are not walled by them. Fire Breath is of course your main stab move here, and Dark Surge is mainly just here for extra coverage. This will let you help hit stuff like Luminami, and while it's mainly only for Luminami, this is pretty important for most Eruptidon sets because Luminamis can still adapt to your sets and be able to wall you. And of course Magnify is here just so we can help break the range attacking walls that we get quote unquote walled by. And our TPs. Sadly, I do not really have a solid enough benchmark so I can use all 500 TPs effectively, but this is the best I can work with. 32 energy lets you use 3 Pyro Pro boosted Fire Breaths with 2 Magnifies and 1 Dark Surge, and 64 HP are the leftovers, while your range attack and speed stats are your stats you want to max out. You can drop speed to run a little bit more bulk if you want to have an Eruptidon that is mostly tailored to breaking bulky teams, but in my opinion, those bulk doesn't really matter unless you're going heavy invested and you don't really want to get outsped by walls potentially such as Stratosaur and Eliguana, so you want to run as much speed as possible. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the counters and checks, and of course the teammates for Eruptidon. So in terms of offensive counters and checks, there is honestly not a lot. You only have Nimari, which is probably your best offensive check that can swap in on any of Pyroland's, or not Pyroland's, but Eruptidon's attacks besides Dark Surge. So Nimari is effectively your best offensive bet. As for Lumions that can revenge kill, in case one of your Lumions die, using fast water types such as Garlash and Deldrix is great for revenge killing Eruptidon, and Gargolem attack is also pretty good for just revenge killing overall. Stratosaur's Soul Burst is also a pretty good option, as this also does pair really well against a lot of your teammates that you can potentially run with Stratosaur, and of course it is pretty offensively oppressive. Another thing to note is that Soul Burst Eruptidons are also pretty prone to hazards because they got no recovery and is still considerably pretty frail for a wall breaker. Using hazards such as barbs, poison barbs, they can be able to chip down Eruptidon. So if you are up against pivoters, do note that revenge killing and offensive Lumions aren't the only things to chip down Soul Burst Eruptidon. And for our offensive and defensive teammates, this is pretty simple. You just want to run stuff that can help out Eruptidon against its range walls. I did mention it can break through its range walls, but having these guys is just pretty great overall because it's not forcing Eruptidon in a situation where it has to break it and is left off at pretty low HP. First off, Nimari is probably your best bet. It does really well against Venilin, Pyroland, and Gargolem defense. Not only that, it does provide pivot support with Flash and Flee, so Nimari and Eruptidon is a really good core at that. And of course, running Eruptidon means you're going to be enabling other range attacking cleaners such as Zulong and Stratosaur, which is really good for your team as a whole, and using pivoters such as Yursnek, Luminami, and Icicle, all three that can take defensive hits pretty reliably, is really great for Eruptidon because even though Eruptidon is still a pretty somewhat bulky Lumion as an offensive Lumion, it still wants help swapping in and will make Eruptidon's life a lot more easier. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the conclusion and my thoughts on Eruptidon. So Eruptidon as a whole is really good. It's solid enough as a wall breaker before it got its Soul Burst, but now it's even stronger. Because it has 127 base range attack and its Pyro Pro ability is going to be tearing through a lot of walls in this metagame. It 2-hit KOs Venilin, Gargolem defense, and Pyroland from a +2 Magnify with Landslide and Fire Breath. So that is something very, very concerning, and also with just its plain coverage alone, without no boosts, it also does guarantee 3-hit KO, all 3 of them. This is Shachi levels of damage with Eruptidon. This is really scary because there is, as far as my knowledge, there is no meta range wall that can stop Eruptidon reliably. Sure, you have the Shade Pearls and the Terra Pearls of the defensive walls, but once those items are expended, then Eruptidon just pretty much goes crazy. And what's really concerning about Eruptidon is that it encourages revenge killing. So you are encouraged to let something die in order to kill Eruptidon, and that doesn't always work because in most phases of the game, like the early and mid game, most good Eruptidon teams will have defensive answers to deal with what it can actually get revenge killed by, and that is really scary. Eruptidon as a whole is looking very, very strong in not only offensive teams but every other team as a whole. So if you want to use a Soul Burst that is really good in this metagame, Eruptidon is the Lumion I'd recommend. So if you enjoyed the video, like the video, and of course subscribe. I'm going to be making other videos just like this and more Soul Burst content as the week passes. This is Stoops, reminding you that Zulong is still a dumpster fire.